Hi, I'm Tanya Janka, and I'm going to explain what the cross-site scripting vulnerability is. So you might think that cross-site scripting is a lot like injection because you are tricking a piece of software into running your malicious code if you are an attacker. But it's slightly different, so let's back up a bit. So the injection vulnerability, which we saw in another video, is where you convince an interpreter to interpret your code, the attacker's code, when really it should be treating whatever you've entered as data. And so the cross-site scripting vulnerability works similarly to that, but the reason why it's different than injection, so injection can be in your operating system and LDAP and SQL or some other query language, etc. Cross-site scripting only works in the front-end JavaScript, and it executes and is interpreted by the browser itself. So it is injected into like the code of the browser, that's the JavaScript that's running inside of it, and then the browser itself runs it and attacks its own user. And that's pretty terrible. And it can do anything that JavaScript has the power to do. So it's not just like a pop-up. So you'll see cross-site scripting demonstrated as a pop-up quite often. And the reason for that is that's how we make JavaScript visible to the end user. But you can turn on a keylogger, you can turn on someone's webcam and watch them. You can do anything that JavaScript can do. And JavaScript, ask any JavaScript programmer, it's extremely powerful. It can do a lot of super cool stuff. And so cross-site scripting, there's three kinds. So there's reflected, which is the most common. And so that's where you've clicked a link in a phishing email or on a website maybe you shouldn't have visited. And it brings you somewhere where it's malicious or where it's vulnerable. And it has the maliciousness inside of whatever it is that you've clicked on, right? And that's like a more obvious attack where the user's done something wrong, like they've made an error. Stored cross-site scripting is different. So stored cross-site scripting is where someone has entered input into an app and it's saved into a database somewhere and they did bad input validation. And then when it gets back out onto the screen, it just explodes in that browser and attacks that poor user. And there's nothing they can do about it, and it's terrible. DOM-based cross-site scripting is where you somehow get your JavaScript into the document object model, the DOM. And so this usually happens in a SPA, single page web application, where it's like one page, it's all built only in JavaScript. And those are harder to do, but they're way harder to find and test for. So DOM-based cross-site scripting is kind of the super scary one. But all of them can hurt our end users, and that's bad. So how do we avoid cross-site scripting? We do input validation on all inputs. So if something's coming from a database and it could have come from the user or been changed, or it's from a third party, or anything could have happened to it, you validate it before you use it. Second of all, anything that goes to the screen, unless it's something that you've hard-coded into your app, so it's coming from the database and API from the user, it's being reflected back, you output and code that. On top of that, on our cookies, we set the HTTP only flag, so we can protect that session ID that's inside our secure cookies, so the JavaScript can't get at it if it is vulnerable to cross-site scripting. And we use content security policy header, and we list all of our different scripts out. So again, if we do happen to be vulnerable somewhere, when the malicious actor goes out to call a bigger script, it can't because it's not on our allow list. So I hope that I made that more clear instead of less clear. I'm Tanya Janka, SheHacks Purple. Check out my YouTube, subscribe, and do all of those things. Thanks.